All right, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome onto the podcast today Pradeep Karpur. He is a partner at EY's AI and data practice and is going to be a speaker for us at our upcoming TDWI Orlando Modern Data Leaders Summit. I'm excited to have him on today. We're going to discuss data governance in the era of generative AI. But before we get into all of the questions, Pradeep, thank you so much for your time today. How are you doing over there?
Doing very well, Andrew, and it's a pleasure being here talking with you. And yeah, maybe before we get started, I'll give a little bit of background about myself. Like I said, I'm a partner in EY's AI and data practice based out here in the Rocky Mountains in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada. Uh, I have been in the field of data analytics for almost 25 years now. I started off my career more as a developer, developing ETL pipelines, data engineering, and then moved on to a little bit of data science while I was in the US working for a biotechnology firm. And then moved on to Canada. In Canada, I have run large data analytics organizations for some of the companies here. And my last, I would say maybe 7, 8 years has been all in consulting, helping companies figure out their data analytics strategies, help them set up how to organize themselves for success in data analytics, what is the right organization model, what's the right architecture they need to have, what is the right type of data governance frameworks they need to put in place. As we all know, this technology is evolving very fast, and with that, the organizations have to continuously play catch up, figuring out the right way to organize themselves, which is what me and my team have been doing. And that leads us well into this topic with generative AI, which is probably the most transformative technology that's happening, and data governance is evolving with it. Really looking forward to this podcast and also the chat in Orlando where we really delve into this topic.
Fantastic. And yes, for our audience members, obviously Pradeep has a deep knowledge in this area. So this is obviously the reason that we have him on this podcast here, as well as in Orlando. And for folks that are interested, I will go ahead and put a link in the description of this episode if you'd like to find out more information about Orlando as well as Pradeep's talk. So let's jump right into the questions here, Pradeep. Generative AI, as you just mentioned, is a buzzword for all of the industry, even outside of data and analytics. But specific for our industry, it seems like it's transforming many business functions. Can we start off maybe where you're seeing generative AI having the largest impact?
Absolutely. Fully agree with you. I would say generative AI is potentially the most transformative technology of our generation, right? I'm quite positive we're just scratching the surface of what this technology can do for the business. Despite that, the impact that it has already created is tremendous, right? I'm seeing a lot of applications both in my organization and with my clients. Just a few examples where we are seeing maximum impact. In the consulting field, which is where I am, it's having a great impact on the productivity of our developers and engineers, right? The amount of time that we are taking now to develop data engineering code or unit testing, or even to develop documentation for the code that we are writing, that time is getting shortened significantly because there's a lot of productivity accelerators, whether it is in Microsoft's Copilot or in any of the other technologies who have GenAI embedded in their tool sets now, which makes the development of code a little bit easier and increases the quality of the code substantially too, because it's standardizing a lot of code, boilerplate code, which you don't have to write anymore, right? So that's one area where we are seeing massive impact from my practice perspective. The other area I would say, which is significantly impacting majority of our clients, is more in the knowledge management and search area, right? Today, we all use ChatGPT for our normal day-to-day life itself, right? We take ChatGPT's help to create a birthday invitation or a party invite or whatever, right? Similar to that, organizations are building on their own versions of ChatGPT, building on top of the LLM models that exist, but with the firewall to protect their data and their information, thereby uploading contracts, safety documents, PDF invoices, organization policies, and while you load all that information into ChatGPT, it's giving your employees a much easier way to search for an answer as to, oh, how much should I pay Andrew Miller for this podcast, for instance, right? ChatGPT is able to put it in context and is able to give that answer much more quicker than in the past, where they would have to go and ask 10 different people, wait for a couple of weeks to get that information. And then other things where we see a lot of uptake is in the co-pilot and in general around summarization, taking meeting
Mhm.
notes, right? Very rarely do we have people on a call now just taking notes, right? You turn on the annotation capabilities and you are generating notes. And one of the example I always give is in the past, just recently, our CEO came over to meet one of our clients, and he was going to come and talk about one of the proposals that we submitted for the client. And what we did was, and wanted to understand, okay, what is the proposal you submitted for the client, right? And this was a 100-page document that we put in front of the customer. And our CEO took that document, put it into ChatGPT. It summarized and gave our CEO a two paragraph summary of what it is, and used that to lead off the meeting, and came across as if you knew everything about this proposal, with
Mhm.
spending just 2 minutes. Right, in the past, this would have taken us much longer. So yeah, there's so many areas where we are seeing a lot of impact. But like I said, I think we're just scratching the surface. There's a lot more to come.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit some of the major ones for sure that we're seeing on our side here at TDWI as well. The engineering aspect with code creation and of course the self-service aspect. I mean, that's I think driving a lot of this as well is doing exactly what you're talking about, being able to democratize the data and have people be able to reach what they need in a much quicker way than ever before. So then let me ask this then, Pradeep, what are some of the biggest challenges organizations face trying to adapt their existing data governance practices to accommodate this generative AI technology and capabilities?
A great question. That's an area which is being impacted quite a bit, because this is, like I said, transformational, right? If we think about traditionally, the premise behind the data governance frameworks that we use today is around governing the data that an organization already has inside their enterprise platform. Let's say an SAP or your data lake or any of the operational systems you use. You know the data you have, and you put together the policies and processes and frameworks to go and govern that data, right? Generative AI is kind of disrupting that landscape, where your employees, or in some cases even your customers, are creating brand new data through their interactions with the AI agent. So it's creating information out at the edge using in your chatbot, and it's when this information is created on the fly, the controls and procedures that you have for your enterprise systems is just does not apply anymore, right? In in a lot of cases, the organizations are not even aware of the data that's being generated using their systems in the cloud using GenAI. That's the biggest challenge, because you cannot govern something that you do not have, or something that's being created on the fly, right? Let's take an example. It's an airline in North America. I do not want to pick the name of the exact airline, but it's one of the airlines had to face a lawsuit because of incorrect information provided by its chatbot, right? The airline argued that the chatbot is a separate legal entity and that it is responsible for its own actions, but could not win the case with that argument. The data and the information that's being shared through Gen AI agents needs to be governed better, right? How do we get on top of it? That's a big challenge that we have as data and AI professionals, especially for people who are focusing on data governance. What do we need to do to further bulletproof our frameworks we have to address this new challenge that's in front of us? Again, that's going to be a big focus of my topic in the summit coming up.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I think there's going to be a lot of development in this area as we continue to see, more and more usage of, as you mentioned, on the fly type of data creation. And you did mention your talk at our summit. I want to ask if you can perhaps give us a little sneak peek. I know you might have just done that there, but if there's a little bit more you can give us about specifically governing AI and generative AI at your talk, what would that be for us?
Absolutely. So in my talk in the summit, I'm going to go into a lot more detail on this particular topic. Uh, I'll be delving into what needs to be done to modernize the data governance framework to mitigate these new risks that we are facing, right? In the talk, for instance, I'll be getting into the details of many of these risks, and I will talk about some real life examples of several companies that have been impacted by these risks. When I keep talking about risks, what are they? Some of them are plagiarism. It's a significant risk as to how do you protect your company from copyright infringement lawsuits that might come your way if you're not careful with generative AI. Hallucination, where models potentially could be passing out incorrect information because of hallucination. How do you protect yourself on that? Improper prompt engineering, the whole concept of prompt management, prompt engineering is being very widely adopted. But do prompts, do they need to be governed? We are governing our data, we are governing our models. Do we need to govern the prompts as well? These are some of the questions that we will be talking about. And then we'll be getting into some practical solutions and controls that needs to be considered to manage these risks.
Well, that's fantastic. And I'll remind folks that is taking place at TDWI Orlando, our Modern Data Leaders Summit, October 21st through the 23rd. I'll put the information to Pradeep's talk in the episode, as I mentioned before. So Pradeep, going off of that, I know that part of this governance is trying to keep up with compliance and regulations. So how do you think organizations can balance innovation with the responsibility of ensuring that their data governance meets compliance and trust obligations?
Great question, Andrew. And I really want to emphasize that word balance you used, right? The word balance is very critical, right? It will not be beneficial to just stop the innovation. Yes, Gen AI is bringing in some risks. That does not mean that we need to stop using it. There are some companies that I've seen who have come out and said, oh, we are going to block ChatGPT. We are going to block Copilot. Not quite sure if that's the right way to go. At the same time, we need to have controls in place to make sure we are compliant to the regulations and government policies. Having a wild, wild west, wherein I had one of my clients where one employee took a very sensitive contract and uploaded that to ChatGPT to get some insights out of it. That's a wild, wild west. You do not want to be there too, which is going to open you up for a bunch of risks, right? How do we get the balance here is super critical, right? And as we all know, regulations are being passed across the world by various government agencies to get a handle on AI. Federal governments are passing AI regulations. State and provincial governments are passing regulations. And in some cases, for example, I operate a lot in the energy industry. The energy regulator is passing regulations on how to use AI. Financial services organizations are passing regulations. These regulations are changing every day, and new regulations are coming up all the time. So we need to be aware of what's coming up so that we are not offside of these regulations. And at the same time, we are giving the right sandbox and put the right controls in place where people can play in the sandbox in a safe manner, innovate and come up with some good ideas, which can then go through a proper process for vetting. One of the things we see is the establishment of AI centers of excellence. When you have these AI centers of excellence, where you have experts in your organization who talk to those innovators and guide them on some of the guardrails and some of the risks they need to be thinking about as they are innovating. And then also a lot of companies are establishing AI governance committees, right? So anytime you build a model, while it's working great in your sandbox, before it goes into production and hits your customers, having a governance committee who looks at that model, looks at the risks of it, and then make a calculated decision around, there are some risks which we think we can manage, but there is still more value and it's worth the risk that this model brings in, and move that into production, right? Having that cost benefit analysis and having those kinds of controls to centers of excellence and the governance committees, I think you will be able to get that balance, which is critical.
Oh, that's fantastic. And yeah, I think we're seeing a return of the centers of excellence. I've known that they've been around in different forms and fashions over a couple decades, but it does feel like a lot more organizations are moving towards that committee or center of excellence. And I think that actually might be a good best practice for folks out there, because it's leading me to my next question here, Pradeep. If you were able to give us a top best practice for organizations starting their journey with both generative AI and advanced data governance, what would that be?
Yeah, I think of just building on top of my previous question, being agile and nimble is probably the most important thing in this area because it's a rapidly evolving field, right? I spoke about those regulations. These regulations are coming up left, right, and center, right? So for your data governance itself, which let's be very honest, in the last 10, 15 years or so, the framework hasn't evolved much, right? Because we didn't have a need to evolve that framework as much. It's all based on people, process, technology, policies, and standards. And uh, we have been fairly used to doing data governance a certain way. But
Mhm.
that's not going to be the case moving forward, right? Your regulations are changing. That means your data governance need to change. So the organizations need to embrace this dynamic nature and ready to adapt and refine your governance policies. And back to the key word of balance, should not be afraid of the technology and curtail the use, and at the same time not lose sight of the risks and implement the appropriate level of controls, that in that way you can responsibly innovate and keep getting value out of this transformative technology.
Well, that's fantastic, Pradeep. And thank you so much for sharing your best practices with us there. I know that more will be shared in your session in Orlando. And before you go, Pradeep, I know we're running out of time here, but one thing I like to ask my guests is, if someone listens to this and they're interested in following up with you, or maybe asking a question or inquiring about your services, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I think the best way would be through LinkedIn. My name is Pradeep Karpur. If you can look me up on LinkedIn, and yeah, I'll be more than happy to have further conversation. And also, I'm hoping to meet a lot of you in Orlando, and we am happy to have conversations there as well. And yeah, it's going to be a fun summit, and we have been spending a lot of time preparing doing a lot of research and building the best material to bring very insightful materials for you. And I hope you will enjoy the talk. And yeah, looking forward to it.
Well, Pradeep, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed our conversation. It was enlightening for me, and I believe for our audience as well. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
To subscribe to the Speaking of Data podcast, or to learn more about TDWI's research and training on all things data management and analytics, visit tdwi.org or click the link in the description below. Thanks for tuning in.